In this episode, Rich Waller, GM of Healthcare for the Modern Data Company, joins us to really give us a ton of value. But just for brief background, I worked with Rich for, I think, 7 years at VisitQuate. Found him to be an enormously inspiring leader, just a privilege of time to spend with him. And now is both of our friend.
Yes. Thank you for really introducing Rich into my life.
Yeah.
And the conversation with Rich today was exceptionally rich.
Dang, yeah.
And so the 3 key takeaways that we're going to learn from Rich today are, 1, how to turn innovation in product development kind of on its head from traditional methods.
Yep.
How to engage with your customers in a very meaningful way that really benefits your product roadmap. And then what are the characteristics of a culture that supports a customer-centric product design process and diligence. So it was a very great conversation about that. Really married. It was interesting. Really married product development, like your product roadmap and how you talk to your people. It was great.
Totally. Yeah.
So
Here
great.
we go. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Are you looking for a positive influence in your personal or professional life?
Do you need some inspiration?
Hi, I'm Colt Briner.
And I'm Sarah Armstrong.
We're on a journey of elevation,
learning and sharing what we discover about how to live fulfilling lives and bring out the best in those around us.
Join us as we explore multiple perspectives, ideas, and influences on our own personal journeys of elevation. Well, this is actually a treat to have you here because I have been personally elevated by you in my career for years. Although you have kind of a unique way that you elevate. It's more like, that's the thing that I want to do in my next presentation. It's not so much like active mentoring as it is active modeling. There's many things about the way that you operate in terms of like how you think, like your strategic approach to working, orienting around customer needs, which is one of the things we're going to talk about today. But I would say that there's a not insignificant way in how I operate in business that I've modeled after watching what you do.
Oh. So basically, Rich has elevated you by showing you up on a regular basis. That's what I just heard. That's what I just heard.
I don't know about that. No.
This is one of those things where you just quietly sort of emulate the other person, you know?
I got it.
And it's complimentary if they notice it, but you don't outwardly say, hey man, I learned something cool from you the other day. We'd never give them the gratification of that direct acknowledgement. But even down to some style choices, honestly.
Oh
yeah.
Okay.
Although I remember actually when I first started working at VisitQuate, you indicated that you were about to get into vests. And then I showed up and I was doing vests and you were like, there goes that.
It's funny that you mentioned that. I actually was going to show up in a vest today in your honor.
Wow.
And when I was walking out the door, my younger daughter kind of said like, Dad,
no.
Like, I don't think so. So we kind of reversed it. But then I got the Elevate t-shirt, so this was even better. So it all worked out.
Great.
Yeah,
all
great.
on point.
Cool.
So this is the debut of our Elevate t-shirt.
It is, yes.
Yeah.
Which are
so
available.
We all have our Elevated AF t-shirts.
Yes, for audience members that wish to offer us their thoughts on topics for us to pursue, other ways that they want to learn how to elevate, and maybe we can bring on some guests you might recommend. People who interact with us meaningfully are welcome to select their size and have a t-shirt.
Yes, excellent.
Yeah.
So today, Rich, we obviously, when we talked about having you on as a guest, thank you for coming in person. This is really a treat. We thought about all the ways that you have elevated Colt more specifically, but even since I've known you, right? The way that our friendship has developed, and really honed in on your ability to design solutions that really meet customers kind of where they are. And I just thought that we thought maybe today would be a great topic to kind of pick your brain about how you go about that and how your approach to that interaction with your customers elevates them and the solution that you're designing.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, it's always a pleasure to see both of you, and it's just great to be here, especially in person and getting to hang out today. So this is great. But yeah, with for solution design, I mean, one of the most critical aspects of solution design that I'm most passionate about, and I think drives so much of what the teams that we've built over in the past have focused on, is the customer discovery process, right? So how do you really get into the minds and the hearts and emotionally connect with your customer, with your client. And I think that that's really the goal in the center of developing a, what we would often call power offers, or things that really create that kind of outsized value and differentiate both solutions, but then also, that same process and those same themes can be used to develop organizations, to develop internal cultures, and really kind of align teams around the goals and objectives.
So this is, I know you have a lot to offer for us in this conversation about this topic, but I think what's valuable to set out initially is, as individuals, right? So we're thinking about the business leaders that would kind of be our listeners, and as organizations, why does this matter? And why is it, if it is, why has it become more important lately?
Yeah, and so I think that first of all, why it matters, right? So the reason it matters is, when you think about creating a business with staying power, creating a business that really kind of resonates with clients and within industries, one of the biggest things to creating sort of a 10x solution is, how does that solution or service solve a major job to be done, but then also, is it really kind of connecting emotionally with the client to the point that they are evangelists for you about it, right?
Sure.
So and I think that that's really what rallies companies around projects, rallies companies around products, and really starts to kind of focus in on what needs to happen to drive the company forward, right? So that's, I think, why it matters, right? And then, from a timing perspective, I think the way that businesses and the rate that business is moving, having this as a core central part of your organization really continues to keep you focused and keep you aligned with where industries are moving.
Do you think that this is something that the B2C space has figured out in advance of the B2B space, and B2B is catching up? Give me kind of your thoughts about B2C versus B2B in this aspect.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think a lot of the examples that we see, in some of these spaces that make you naturally go to, discovery or customer I think we naturally go B2C first, right? So a lot of these frameworks, I think, naturally have been developed over the years with a B2C lens first, and then are sort of adapted to B2B as they go. So I think that it's kind of a natural progression as new models get developed, and I think the B2C space tends to be the tip of the spear oftentimes in kind of developing models of just any type of corporate structure, and then the B2B space follows, which is naturally where we spend a lot of our time. So
yeah, do you think that in the B2B space we have been slow to accept or adapt to the fact that at the end of the day, our customer is just a person, right? Not a title, not a company, but somebody, the decision maker, is a human being that has the same needs that they would have and if they were in a B2C space. Do you think that we're struggling with the acceptance of that, or do you think we're making progress?
Well, I think that it's a continual struggle, right? I think as you start to, when you're thinking about a corporate entity, oftentimes as the buyer, right? I think sometimes it's easy to maybe forget that oftentimes purchasing decisions and even the value that's being created, these are human beings, right? They have they're emotional people. They buy not necessarily entirely rationally, based on just dollars and cents, right? There's a partnership that has to be developed. Oftentimes, what we try to do is really develop a trusted advisor type relationship on topics that we're selling into. And so I think that again, part of just keeping customer discovery at the center of every aspect of your business, I think helps kind of hammer that theme, because I think if left to our own devices, it's often comfortable to sit back in our offices and kind of think about things in terms of B2B versus really on a daily basis challenging ourselves to really connect with our clients and prospects as people.
So how do you approach a customer when you're kind of in this discovery phase, trying to figure out, one, if they're gonna buy, right? Obviously you're trying to sell them something in the beginning of their relationship, but then as that relationship continues on, you want to keep them as a customer, and you want them to advise you on how to make your product better.
Right. Yeah. Anyway, I think that the one of the first fundamental challenges of getting into kind of the customer discovery process that we like to employ is actually kind of maybe leaving your pride at the door, and because it's uncomfortable, right? I mean, a lot of times when you want to go out, I think that a lot of times we think that, you know, we need to be perceived as having all the answers, right? So when you're asking, when you're being very open with a prospect who's, you know, oftentimes looking to you for the answers, and a lot of the interactions end up with, you know, us asking tons of questions, us wanting to observe their, you know, business processes. We want to walk the halls and watch, you know, people interact with our software solutions and really understand what's going on around their desk, right? Like, well, there's a stack of papers over there. What's that, right? You know, like, and that starts to help you really understand, okay, there's a lot more going on here outside of our window into, you know, the world that's our product. And so I think putting bias aside and doing client and customer discovery that's outside of even the solution area that you're developing really helps to develop unique perspective and gives you a better understanding of the kind of holistic aspect of what drives their decision making.
As Elev8's resident duaholic, a moment ago, I heard you say the word framework, and that just lights up all kinds of stuff in my brain. So I'm eager to hear you convey for myself and the audience, what is a framework that you use to approach this aspect of solution development?
Yeah, and so there's a number of them that all kind of come together, I think. But, you know, we mentioned kind of the aspect of, you know, getting outside of the office, right? Getting outside of the office, getting into the customer environment to the greatest degree possible, right? I think one of the examples that you hear a lot in kind of going to B2C and B2B is, you know, things like, you know, airline executives that never fly economy class, or, you know, you know, banking executives that don't do their own banking, right? So things like that, you know, like, we want to get into the client's business. If we haven't been in that seat ourselves as a prior, you know, kind of career, you know, we want to get into the mix, walk the halls, understand what's happening. So that's a big aspect of it. And then as we start to discover, right, we want to really figure out ways that we can connect on multiple points. And one of the frameworks we use for that is the Harvard B2B value pyramid, right? So it was a framework, I think, that was originally developed for B2B by Bain, and some other, you know, kind of consulting groups have taken it and morphed it over the years. But Harvard did a really good kind of summary of it a few years back, where they talk about the pyramid and their elements that really create a kind of purchasing decisions, but then, you know, how do you connect with a prospect? And so at the very top, as you can imagine, are emotional connections, you know, fear, fun, perks, like things that are not always obvious. And at the bottom are things like, you know, revenue increase and cost reduction, and kind of those things that almost end up as kind of check boxes in the process, but aren't necessarily the drivers of renewal and drivers of really purchasing decisions in the beginning. So you know, oftentimes with our product teams, we'll leverage the value pyramid and require, when they create a PRD or a product requirements document, that they have to list how many elements of the value pyramid does this solution hit, right? As a very proactive approach. And so it keeps it as kind of a centerpiece. It's not just a, you know, academic exercise. We really focus on it. And then, you know, a lot of the study that Harvard did says that the more of those elements that you hit with a product, or even with a marketing approach to a product, you know, all the good things happen, right? You know, higher revenue, higher recurring revenue, and renewals, and word of mouth, net promoter score, all those things improve. So, you know, bringing those things together, when we're doing discovery, we're really focusing on the elements of the value pyramid to see, you know, I want to know, how do I connect emotionally? What keeps this person up at night? Even if it's not related to my product, right? Like if it's something ancillary that's in the market or otherwise, you know, we want to know those things so that when we're developing collateral, we're developing solutions, we really have a good feeling about what makes, you know, this potential prospect or potential customer profile tick.
Go ahead.
I'm super curious. This is a good sign of the conversation, because we're both very, very eager to ask you questions. I'm super curious now, once you gather that information, how explicit are you as you reflect it back to them? I mean, do you like list, oh, here's fears, here's perks, here's this, or are you more subtle with how you roll that into the presentation? Tell me about that. Yeah, and I think that a lot of this is, you know, oftentimes it's more of an internal framework that, you know, we're trying to, again, really just make this a very comfortable process for someone that we're working with in terms of a discovery, right? We want to really understand. And I think, you know, some of the misconceptions about
running a kind of discovery-led approach or a listening approach is that, a lot of the kind of major innovators of our time have been perceived as leading the client and not necessarily listening, right? You've heard famous quotes from Henry Ford and Steve Jobs and otherwise who are kind of notorious. But I think what's a little bit misunderstood about some of those people and their processes, if you take Apple specifically, they really distill down what their products do, what the jobs are that are to be done with those products, right? And so, like the Apple iPod as an example, when it came out, they didn't list it like everyone else did, where that says, this is an MP3 player with this much gigabytes of RAM and all this kind of stuff. They said 1,000 songs in your pocket. Right. And so it was just honing. That's what the customer wants. Right. They don't really care. And they do, but they don't really care about all the technical specifications. It's distilling down based on that discovery. They knew, music listeners and fanatics would want, 1,000 songs in their pocket with a super easy experience.
Why this seems like it's not rocket science, right? It's kind of the basic elements of human behavior coupled with I have a solution that I want a human to want to purchase and use.
Right.
So why do you think people struggle with this approach so often?
I think it's because people again want to be perceived as having the answers, or they think they have the answers, right? It's comfortable to do innovation within your own walls and your own whiteboards. And I think you get enough smart people in a room, they'll develop a solution and think it's the greatest idea ever, and they'll want to come in. I think, and even the technical teams that I work with. It's a constant kind of reminder that we're not here for them to validate our solution. We're here to understand and understand really what makes them tick. And oftentimes you'll see engineers or product managers come in, and the whole point of their discussion is leading questions towards the answer they want.
That's right.
Right. And so I think that resisting that is actually very difficult, especially for a technically minded person that's going in with a goal to say, is this customer going to buy what I have instead of, forget about what I have. And I think that's just like, as humans, it's difficult to kind of get into that flow where, you're really open to what you potentially have not being the right solution or needing to be changed based on the discovery processes that you're going through.
Yeah, go ahead.
You may have a lot more to share on this stage of the process, but something that comes up for me that I'm curious about now is, it seems like there almost necessarily has to be a point where you go from being very fluid and discovery oriented to declaratory. This is the solution that we've created. Like, how do you get a read on when you're supposed to make that transition? Yeah,
so I think that when we come back with the discovery output, right? So we're going to be looking for specific things. We're going to basically create a rapid prototype of what we think is that kind of emotionally connecting package or product. Then it's about going back and iterating, right? And coming back in that case and presenting like, this is what we heard, this is what we have. And really kind of taking I'll call it kind of 360-degree feedback in terms of what we have presented. So there's definitely a point in there that you have to move to that structured point.
And when you started out in your career, has this always been your approach, or is this an approach that you learned over time?
Go ahead.
Definitely not always. No, there have been a few points actually. One of the I think where this kind of really crystallized to me is when I was just taking over my first sort of sales and growth team. I did a week of study at INSEAD in France, right? And so the professor there, Jean-Claude Larac, who wrote a really good book called The Momentum Effect, really kind of structured and opened my eyes into a lot of things I was sort of trying to figure out, and I had some inclinations, but like the structures and processes that they presented in that class really helped me to kind of take that, make it my own to some degree. But there was definitely a turning point there where I learned a ton and came back with, I think, what were some pretty productive.
I want to know why you laughed, because I feel like there's a story that made you laugh.
There is. I was remembering this very specific moment of like evolution at VisitQuate, and there was a slide deck associated with when we were presenting to the organization how we were going to shift things, and the first slide was something along the lines of, "This is how we've been doing it." And the 2 quotes were, "That would be cool, let's build it." And then the second slide was like a 5-stage process that was really discovery based, and then moving from that discovery to production, and then eventually getting to a declaratory state about what it is that you have and aim to bring into the market. That was really like a clearly marked evolution in the organization.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
led by you from this experience that you had?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a lot of us were struggling with needing to transform our process, right? So Colt was definitely a huge contributor to that. Some of like this course that I took was actually a big driver, and really got some great kind of frameworks to bring back to operationalize it. But we've had a great team there that has done so much. So it's been.
Well, you had the
definitely.
culture that supported that kind of evolution,
absolutely,
right?
yeah.
Which is so important.
Absolutely.
It is classic though, right? I mean, that energy of, that would be cool, let's build it, right? Because when you find those precious pockets of energy, people are excited to create a thing that sounds cool, like that would be so cool and that would solve a lot of problems.
Right.
That is an energy that a lot of organizations use to drive their product development, because that energy is difficult to come by. But it sounds like you found almost a richer source of energy by going through this discovery process and hearing directly from the people whose problems you're trying to solve how to directly solve their problems. Provides perhaps even a better source of energy for development. Is that what you found?
Yeah, and I think that kind of that's cool, let's do it. If you can continue to keep that energy and agility, but with some bookends and some processes that really harness that, I think that's where we've always kind of tried to keep that focus, right? So that we don't have it doesn't become too rigid, it doesn't become too process oriented. There's a lot of messiness, right? I mean, the other slide in that deck, if you remember, was like the discovery process, and there's like a start of an arrow and the end of an arrow, and in the middle is this like complete washing machine. And it's like it's a messy process, it's unpredictable, it's not necessarily something you can always put in a spreadsheet, which can be challenging, especially in a structured environment.
Yeah.
But I think if done and done with some repetition, the muscle can be developed to create predictability within the process as well. But it is messy. You don't necessarily know what that discovery is going to bring if you're really open to what really listening to the client.
Well, it's funny because what's coming up for me during this whole conversation is like step one is recognizing that the customer is a human being and the developer is a human being, and all of their flaws, right? And so your point around it's cool, let's build it. A lot of people take their own experience, their own biases, their own filters, and they have a hard time. Well, I would say we all have a hard time seeing things clearly because we have all of our own stuff packed in there. So your approach kind of sounds like it pulls away a lot of that human fallacy, right, and gets to the heart of what is the customer looking for from their point of view.
Right, and I think where this becomes, like you mentioned, right, it doesn't seem like rocket science, but where this starts to, I think, become pretty transformative in terms of a process and a way to drive a company is, if you think about, one of the biggest challenges that we have as leaders in business is alignment, right? It's constant, right? How do you create alignment and kind of a central focus around engineering teams and sales teams and marketing teams and client services teams? I mean, those are the things that, you give it time, they will start to diverge. It's like some sort of business physics, right? That, people start to, teams start to kind of create their own focus, they get in a silo, they have their own process. All of a sudden, sales and marketing are marketing and selling things that products like, I don't know where they got that, right? Because we're not building that, right? So, I think what's so almost kind of magical about keeping customer discovery at the core of all of those functions is that it naturally creates sort of something to rally around that keeps everyone kind of focused on an objective, right? Because if customer discovery is part of your client services process or core to your client services process, that feedback loop will be feedback that will be coming back to sales, back to marketing, back to product. And all of those organizations continue to stay focused around those jobs to be done that could have been discovered by anyone on the team.
Right.
But as long as it's around a specific process and we know we're solving it, engineering is going to be building for it, product's going to be designing for it, sales and marketing are going to be selling, because the easiest thing to sell as a sales and marketing team is problem, right, solution, right? You know,
Do you-
especially in tech, where
Yeah.
oftentimes we are guilty, and I've been guilty many times, of building very cool technology things just because they're very cool, right?
Yeah. I would also think that one of the challenges that you'd have to address in the discovery process is also being clear about what you will be solving for and what you won't be solving for. Because I think one of the challenges is, you know, oh, I see all of these problems, I want to try to solve all of them.
Mm-hmm.
How do you address that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's, in terms of that, it really comes down to prioritization. And again, what we would do is we'd go back to sort of something that would be a more structured scoring system. And the value pyramid, again, is one that works well. If you come back and say, okay, we've got 10 things we can solve for, right? These two hit this pyramid in multiple points, and the other three maybe don't hit as many. It's a kind of pre-agreed upon priority process that you don't have, you know, because oftentimes the other thing that creates a little bit of strain in organizations is, you know, if those that don't get their ideas implemented, right? Because then it's hard to, you know, the cohesiveness of a team has a lot to do if everybody's bought in on these are the problems we're solving. If I have an idea that my idea was better, but you know we're building this instead, I think it's natural to have some of those issues culturally. But if everyone knows ahead of time, hey, this is an objective way, we're ranking and prioritizing, these ideas had the highest scoring, and now we're going to go for it, I think it's easier to kind of say, all right, I'm going to commit to that plan even though I still think my idea is a good one.
Yeah, yeah.
What you're talking about is a process that does require leadership discipline, business discipline, decision-making discipline. I'm sure if you did your discovery process with your existing clients and prospective clients, and everybody wanted the same thing, yay, that's happy, everybody can do that. But you were talking about a second ago that there's some rigor that you brought into this, right? So there's weighting, scaling, scoring, that type of thing. Can you tell us about maybe some of the categories that you use for that scoring? I remember some of them being like market viability, margin opportunity, how many problems we're solving for our customers, differentiation in the marketplace, how do we distinguish? What are some of the ones that you're going to recommend for our leaders? Yeah,
so I mean, one of the ones I would recommend, because some of those definitely do get more complicated, right? Sure. If you go back to, you know, and again, we don't have the visual of the value pyramid, so I'm trying to keep doing this. I don't know. I don't know if that helps, but you know, anyway. So you know, we would run a pretty simplified scoring system that says, you know, we're going to do like a 1 to 5 of different elements that hit, right? So emotional connection, fun, design, you know, revenue increase, cost reduction, and so we would go through that and actually score those elements, and we come up with pretty simplified scoring as to this is where we're going to focus, right? The second phase, the kind of what you're talking to, that's where we would really start to business case it, right? So then we start to say, okay, like what's the potential value? And the thing that's amazing about this, if you do it correctly, it's that your marketing is pretty much almost done in terms of where you're, you know, because it's not as if, okay, I'm getting this cool thing now as a marketing and sales team and thinking, all right, now how do I frame why someone should buy this, you know, where's the value to them? And otherwise, if, you know, the kind of ideation and innovation teams really do this properly, they kind of hand the kit to the next, you know, team in the process to be able to go to market in a very, very focused way.
Because you started with that language.
Right, that was how this all originated, was we're creating this value for the client, or we're providing this experience for the client. That's why we're building it. That's what everybody's rallied around. And so I think that process really, you know, gets, you know, versus, you know, I think there's just natural things that you want to do with, you know, making sure that you can produce it at a margin, those types of things. Let's check those boxes.
Sure.
But, you know, really kind of pushing that customer job to be done forward through the process, I think is what creates that, again, that really clean alignment among the teams.
So I want to take us down just a little bit of a different path, but I think it's very relevant. When Colt and I talked about asking you to be a guest, and then you said yes, which made me very happy, we talked about what are we going to talk about with you, because we came up with several topics. And one of the topics that we discussed was the development of culture and the importance of corporate culture. And as I'm listening to you talk about the ability to really have the discipline and the rigor to do this effort, it really depends a lot on the culture of the team. So can you talk a little bit about how you created, or how you or what you saw in those cultures that really helped drive this type of discipline?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, first off, I think when you think about building a team, right? Building a team of intellectually curious individuals is really important, right? So when we're interviewing, or we're always looking for people that have unique life experiences, have really just, I would say, are curious both intellectually, professionally, because those lead to, I think, the best team members in this model, right? So that's kind of one element that we strive for, and the other is just those that are very passionate about the customer and about their needs, right? And so when I culturally, again, we would try to provide these processes as a way to rally people around it. And what we saw is that people naturally, they really like to rally around the customer, right? I mean, I think it's just something that, even if culturally you're looking for a theme, it works really well. And I think it always comes down to people.
Yeah.
But assuming you have the right team in place, or even if you have a team that is being inherited from any kind of an acquisition or anything like that, I think kind of refreshing around the customer, around their needs. And what's pretty cool about it is, it's empowering to everybody on the team, right? So you don't have to be on the product team. You don't have to have innovation experience to do this, right? I mean, you can be an account manager, you can be a sales rep, you can be, anybody in the organization. And what I like to do is give them all the same sense of power and importance that, you could hear one thing. If you're listening, you might hear one thing and just kind of in passing, like the meeting's over, you're walking, back to the break room, and you'll hear something like, wow, this is really what's keeping me up at night, or this is really, and so it's, training the teams to really listen for those things. And, it almost like work almost starts when the meetings are over, right? Because it's like, that's where a lot of that magic happens. I remember one time when we were looking to automate a process, someone was using our solution and they're, doing all this stuff, and we're like, nice, like we're crushing this, right? And then all of a sudden they pick up a piece of paper and go walk down the hall. And we're like, what are you doing?
Excuse me?
Yeah, like, where are you going with that? It's like, well, so, this is really cool what we do here, but then we got to do all this other stuff, right? And we're like, and that, you have to take data from here and then you're going to put it on paper and walk it down the hallway? Yeah, why? Well, your solution doesn't have that thing. It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right? But again, like without sitting there,
Yeah.
I mean, we would just, when you're asking questions around what's in your own domain, you don't see it.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that was one of our client services team members. It was just sitting there and they were saying like, hey, you got to come watch this, right? And so we came over there and it was like, awesome. Right, and that person got a tremendous amount of credit, for that that kind of next feature, which really kind of connected a process to create a whole lot of automation.
Yeah,
So.
that's awesome.
So as you were starting this question about culture, this is what comes up for me, because I'm big into operationalizing things like culture and purpose, meaning it's not just in how you interact with your customers, it's what you build internal of your organization. So these practices of letting the questions lead, letting the client lead, do they translate into letting your employees lead? How does that orientation, that mentality color how leaders interact with employees and how employees interact with each other?
Great question.
Yeah, no, and again, I think it comes back to that kind of almost predefined sense of alignment, right?
Okay.
So, say if you come to me and you've got a topic and you want to go explore this, right?
Yeah.
And you're kind of framing it in, look, this is why I'm doing this, because we ran this discovery process. We have this insight from the client that we know connects with them emotionally. You need my help to take this. I'm going to be like, I'm in, because I'm already in on that mission, right? And so I think from a culture and alignment perspective, it really, really helps to just connect teams around that kind of foundational, again, almost like predefined thing that we've all agreed to. That there's not, where otherwise it might be that I have my own idea, or we're something is happening, and that's where things almost kind of grind to a halt in companies, because it's just like defaulting to lack of action instead of okay, I'm already bought into this concept.
Right.
So that actually is very enlightening in regards to the process that you're detailing for like how this company operates as a mechanism to serve client needs. I want to take it further to ask you about in terms of leaders interacting with employees, asking questions like, what are they trying to achieve in their career? What ways do they want to grow? How do they want to build their knowledge? Like, is it also in effect in those interactions? Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, well, and I think where that can be really great is as leaders, right? Employ the same process with your employees, right? So discovery, listening, understanding, right? So when you're interacting with, whether it's a customer, whether it's an employee, if you've built that muscle internally, right, your ability to understand how do you connect emotionally with your employees, right? What keeps them up at night? What are they trying to, what do they need to get to that next level? You know, what is that next level, right? What are they trying to do? And I think if, you know, that approach permeates up and down an organization, it starts to just create, you know, a lot of really great interactions, because, you know, in both cases, an employee is feeling listened to, leaders are actually listening, and, you know, but it's all kind of with the right intent to, you know, run that exploration or discovery process that, you know, creates those connections.
I can see what you laying out here is almost the starting point, the square one on this approach is to transition from this mentality of, I have a great solution, here's why you should want it, to, I'm interested in understanding what it is that I have that could be made powerful for you. That's in the context of the solution conversation, but you could have that same sort of first step leap to transition how you're interacting internal of an organization, the initial assumption being, oh, I have a great job, you should want it, to how do we make this organization a powerful place for you? And that's definitely 100%. A discovery and inquiry process.
Absolutely, yeah.
Powerful guidance.
Well, one of my favorite book, The 7 Habits, right? It's just really that seek first to understand, then to be understood concept, just applied in the customer, applied in the employee, right? If you kind of develop that habit of listening first and asking questions, but in general, we are hardwired to make declaratory statements instead of asking questions. Where does this go wrong?
What are the pitfalls?
This is a great question. So we have one example from our own collective experience, Colt and I, is we ran a discovery process that I think went initially wrong and then ended up becoming a success once we kind of rejiggered. But, you know, where I've seen it go wrong is, I think, like you mentioned, there is a point at which you have to kind of make the decision and go for it in terms of the solution, right? And so when we developed our first, the world's first, right, you know, automated data analyst with Anna at VisIQuate, we ran a very good process. This was, you know, Colt and I were like cooking with gas. We had this new process. We were loving it. We did a bunch of discovery sessions. And, you know, we came in, I think where it went wrong a little bit for us is we came in with some bias. We did listen a lot. We got, you know, we understood that, you know, having an automated data analyst that could be at your fingertips, answering questions pretty comprehensively within the revenue cycle, people would love it, right? And I think emotionally connected, people love it. People were, you know, excited. So we, you know, took all that discovery, we built the initial version of the product, we put it out there. People were still very excited. Yes, I love this. Like, you know, I love this idea. And then what happened was, as we started seeing the usage, it was just like this and it was like this, right? This and this. And we were kind of figuring like, what, you know, why are people on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday morning not logging in and asking Anna questions, right? And so when we started getting deeper, you know, basically what clients really wanted was for Anna to tell them what to do. They didn't want to ask questions, right? And so when we figured that out, you know, we kind of pivoted the product strategy to embed Anna within our workflow solution, within our recommendation engine, so that, you know, the value of Anna really is coming at you proactive for kind of next best action. And that's where we have seen usage increase significantly. But we completely missed that on the first round of discovery, because I think we were so excited, you know, partially because of me, on wanting to do NLP and NLU, which are all technical concepts, that we kind of missed the, you know, people, that's cool, but what they really want is they want their, you know, their workers to have lower barriers to entry for training. They want next best action recommendations. They don't want to have to remember what to ask Anna or type that. You know, yes, that is valuable and we have those features and people still use them. But what created, I think, the momentum effect for us on that product line was realizing that, and it took a couple iterations to get there.
Yeah, I remember it's like being able to query your data conversationally really speeds up the exercise in finding the needles in your data haystack.
Right.
It's like, but Anna's sitting on top of the whole haystack. Yeah. Can you just go,
tell me where
are the needles?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So on your journey from just your own career and your own leadership journey, what has been particularly inspirational? I know you said your training in France, your 1 week training in France was a huge moment, but not a lot of people can do that. I'm going to assume that not a lot of people have that opportunity. What are some other sources of influence for you? Books, TED Talks, people, experiences?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the framework that we have evolved it really comes from a few different sources, right? So one is Competing Against Luck by Clayton Christensen is a great book. It talks about kind of the concept of a lot of this discovery and understanding the job to be done. And there's a lot of great frameworks that are in there that can be adapted. The momentum effect, as I mentioned, from the professors at INSEAD is fantastic. It really kind of starts to frame the value pyramid and the power offer concept and how do you really connect emotionally and like all the value of that. Like those two are just like our core, right? And I think that they're great. And then my Bible for sales is Predictable Revenue, right? I think Ross is the name of the author. Again, just like those three together coming for kind of sales and marketing, product innovation, and how to tie it all together culturally are great. And a lot of the topic that you mentioned around internal, right, is there's a whole section of the Momentum Effect book on how to apply all of those, kind of power offer developments internally to build culture. And so the like last portion of the book takes the whole framework and basically focuses it internally and talks about some great examples. So it's a great source of.
And so we can offer some specificity. You mentioned work from Bain and Harvard.
Yeah.
Maybe we could just offer some suggestions on what to Google, unless you actually know the names of the work.
Yeah, so it's the Harvard B2B value pyramid. If you Google that, and it's that's a whole section by Harvard is very, very good, and it's a kind of a accompanied article around the value pyramid. Short read, but I think very rich in in framework and opportunity.
So if there's like a first action to take, either back to the office. Oh, you want to do it? Go ahead.
No, good for you.
Okay. If there's like a first action to take, either back to the office or in my own like personal exercise after this podcast, or then I'll get back to the office on Monday, kind of thing. What do you have a recommendation for a first action?
Don't go to the office.
Okay.
Go to the customer.
Great.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
And just dive in, right? And I think that the frameworks and things, what I would say is, the just going and being open to seeing what you see and hearing what you hear is the first step. And then, adding the frameworks, like don't feel like you have to have the frameworks and the pyramid all memorized or anything like that to jump into this. I think it's, pick up the phone, make a call, get in person if you can with the client and just really understand, what's keeping them up at night, how their week's going, and just really observe that.
This has been such a great conversation. I personally feel like I've learned so much,
Elevated.
and I'm already thinking about I need to do some things differently. So thank you, Rich, for coming. It's great to have you. Thank you for setting up a nice studio for us.
Yeah, right on. This has been great.
Yeah, well,
Definitely
thank you both.
elevated and inspired again. Now I'd have to step up my pocket square game in addition to all of the concepts you've given us today.
Well, thanks
Awesome.
again. This was great. It was an awesome session, and always a great to hang out with both of you.
Yeah, thanks so
Likely
much.
we'll be asking you back.
Yes, yes.
Happy
for sure.
anytime. Yeah.
Cool.